So, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. This is a joint work with Gordon Clark and Peter Tufano, and it is a part of the C0 Monash superannuation project, specifically Stream 3. We have a huge database. We are looking at some issue retirement issue with this database, and we have been able to draw down some conclusions about advice seeking that we are presenting today. Now, as we all know, defined contribution pension systems are requiring or are assuming individuals to be planning agents. That is to say, we are assuming individuals to take decisions in order to making plans for future income at retirement, to integrate short and long term, and to think about contribution, investment, and drawdowns. That could be, as the behavioral research is telling us, that could be a tough issue, so a complex bundle of decision making. What we are looking at in our paper then is the degree to which agents seek advice in planning for the future, and specifically three issues are our main focus: distinguishing between categories of advice seeking. People seek advice about different topics, so we are focusing on which kind of topic is most salient to them and when. The time of advice seeking divided between working life and approaching to retirement, and the correlates of such advice seeking. So actually, what is driving, from an empirical point of view, seeking advice? We made two set of assumptions in our paper. The first one is that DC, defined contribution participants, are planning agents and are seeking advice as a flow. So advice seeking is a flow instead of a moment. It's not just a point in time, but a flow. That is something supported in a way by Friedman's permanent income hypothesis. So advice seeking is mostly relying on unexpected change in lifetime income, and it is punctuated perhaps by the life cycle factors. That is to say, is changing in a predictable way, as we all know, through the life cycle, and it is integrating the short and long term. The second set of assumptions that are partly concurring with this one are DC participants seek advice when confronting changing, that is to say, an unexpected context, some change that is unexpected in the context in which they are making that decision. For example, since our database, as we will see in a moment, is about Australia, we have been able to capture a change in the federal government tax reform in Australia that happened in 2006, and we have been able to see how this change affected advice seeking from the DC participants. Or, of course, we have been able to tackle the effect of the global financial crisis, because as we will see, database is spanning from 2004 until 2013. And finally, of course, we have been able to face the issue of an immediate retirement. So actually, our two assumption set is lifetime and permanent income as a flow of advice seeking versus pinpointing some trigger events in advice seeking. As I said, our database is about DC plan participants spanning from 2004 to 2013, and this database has been given us by Mercer Australia, that I guess you all know. It is a fund manager, a very large fund management company. It comprises more than 500,000 people, participants, and we have been tracking more than 800,000 calls with over 2 million topics, meaning that any call can raise more than one topic, of course, right? We have 140 topic categories, meaning, for example, I didn't receive the annual statement, as well as which is my annual return, or shall I contribute to this fund instead of this other fund? The topic we have been able to see more than 140. So given the hypothesis and the database, what we have done is to set up an empirical strategy in order to see what is driving advice seeking, and what is driving different topic of advice seeking. We have three main tools. We have been using three main tools. A clustering analysis, because of course one main issue for us is to group homogeneous topics into few categories. So we applied the Kalinski-Arabas criterion for optimal clustering, and we end up with three clusters of topics: administrative topics, investment topics, and retirement planning topics, based on the optimal clustering criterion. Then what we have done is a co-integration analysis among all these three topic categories to see whether there was or not some co-integration, and then we tackle the standard empirical analysis with an OLS and a system TOBIT. Why? Actually, system TOBIT, because as you all know, given the issue of number of calls, we should be careful about corner solutions. So this is empirical strategy, and a couple of slides about our main findings. So as you see, this is the proportion of calls divided among the three topic categories: administrative, retirement planning, and investment, throughout the time span we had. So as you can see here, three or maybe four things to point out. The first one is that we have some built-in volume in the administrative topic. Of course, you see some stratification, and that is something that maybe we have accounted for. You always have some administrative topic coming in as a built-in volume. The second thing is that on the administrative matters, you have a spike in 2007, and it is exactly due to the tax reform in the Australian system that was announced in 2006, but displayed its effect on calling in 2007. That is pretty interesting, by the way, and this is something that we have been looking at in our first paper about this. So how people procrastinate to seek advice regarding an announced reform. Another thing I'd like to point out is, you see how the retirement planning is driving the volume up to 2008, when investment matters take over, and we all know why, of course. And the final thing is that this is what based our co-integration analysis, and we have been able to prove that there is no co-integration among all these three time series. That is to say, they are not wondering about the same stochastic trend, so they have a life per se, if you want. So there is something going on within each topic category. Here, let me spend a couple of words on this. This is just an example, because here we have the gender specification of the three categories of calls, of topics, from 40 years old participant up to 75 years old, or more than that. So here you have the age of participants, the gender proportions, and the topics they raise by cohorts, right? So according to these results, here you have a lower proportion of females calling in for administrative matters going on into the life cycle. So approaching retirement, you have a lower proportion of female calling in for administrative matters. That is exactly the opposite that we can see for retirement planning. As you see, you have some volume building up of female calling in approaching to retirement. Instead, regarding the investment matters, you see the proportion is pretty stable. This is I said this is an example because we have done the same thing looking at salaries and account balances. It is pretty important because, as you know, the issue of stakes on the table when talking about retirement is still puzzling in the standard literature, academic literature. So let me go briefly to our further results. Here you have the time series of calls based on the age of topic and age of the participants. From this picture you can see how initially, again, investment matters are privileged with respect to retirement, and then they are taking over. Of course, approaching to retirement, you see some takeover of retirement matters, and of course you have always these events punctuating, so triggering the attention of participants. Here, so keep in mind that our competing set of hypotheses were flow of advice seeking with respect to triggering points, triggering events. Actually, we pinpointed 3 triggering ages for advice seeking. The first one is the preservation age. So, approaching the preservation age, participants see a surge in advice seeking. Approaching the median age of retirement for Australian workers, and encountering, of course, the entitlement age to claim back some pension benefits, right? So, actually what we have seen is that it is a sort of combination of the competing set of hypotheses triggering the interest in seeking advice. Now, does it matter? Of course it does. And why? Otherwise we won't be here. No? Why? Actually, the key findings on advice seeking is pretty important, not only from a behavioral point of view, but also and mostly from an industry point of view. Briefly, we found that, for example, on a gender point of view, women tend to call less on retirement planning with respect to men after 55 years old. Instead, men call more than women on investment matters each age cohort post 40 years old, and account balances and salaries matters. So there is an example to say what? To say that there is room for designing, framing a tailored advice-seeking system, if you want. And why? Exactly to be more effective. Exactly what we were saying the session before. We are looking at the other side of the moon. We are the demand side of advice seeking. And if we combine the demand side of advice seeking with the supply side of advice seeking, we could design a more efficient system. That is, our main interest. So implication and conclusion. And categories of advice seeking are a viable way to understand the behavior of DC participants. They reveal stages in participant interests, provide insight, of course, in designing service system, and indicates how and why investment matters should be distinguished from other categories. That is to say, those are to be focused in a particular way. And lastly, the main interest in looking at the demand side of advice seeking is about providing a more efficient engagement system. We have been talking today about engagement. So now, looking at what interests the participant help us in designing an engagement system that is more effective. They are trying the drop-in center in Australia that kind of look very efficient, but there is a geographical issue there. And that's mostly it, because the main thing is to design a robust system of advice seeking.